Hey guys, today we are in the book of Genesis chapter 4. We left off yesterday with Adam and Eve being judged and kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And so we pick up today where it says, now Adam knew Eve, his wife. That idea of knew means that they sexually came together, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. What's interesting is the name Cain. The name Cain in Hebrew means I've gotten him. Okay, it means I've gotten him, or here he is. And so it's the idea that Eve thought that Cain, being her firstborn son, was the man promised that was going to come through the seed of Eve that would be the Messiah. Okay, so that's her thought on this. And she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again, she bore his brother named Abel. It means to be empty. And now Abel was a keeper of the sheep, and Cain was a worker of the ground. So we have Abel was a shepherd, and Cain was what we would call today a farmer. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock and their fat portion. So they're bringing a sacrifice to God. Now, remember, this is Genesis chapter 4. God has not proclaimed that he needs sacrifices. We don't even see that until the book of Exodus. But here it was a sense of wanting to be with God, that they would bring something. And so the farmer brings vegetables and the shepherd brings a sheep. But notice it says he brings the firstborn of his flock and fat. The fat in the Old Testament is known as what we would say is luxury today. The fat is the best portion of the animal. It's the tastiest. It's the best, most tenderest part. And so he brings the best of this. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. What's interesting here is we're not sure how they knew this, right? How did they know what God took acceptable and God did not take as acceptable? Did God instantly light one on fire and burn it up so that it would rise up to him? We're not sure how this happens, but somehow they knew, right? They knew that God accepted one and did not accept the other. And the Lord said to Cain, it says, but for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. So Cain was very angry. He was very angry and he fell on his face. Here we see in chapter 4, the first part of what I would call is religious pride, right? He was angry because his brothers got accepted, but he didn't. He wanted to be acceptable to God. He wanted. So we have this idea of religious pride, religious sin, this kind of idea that I wanted God to accept me, not you. And so he gets angry of this. He falls on his face, and the Lord asked him, why are you angry? He said, if you do well, right? So God is talking to him. If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at your door. God is telling Cain about sin, and he's telling him to, hey, don't let anger win, right? Don't let anger take over, because that's when sin will happen. It's desire, the desire of sin, the desire of self-pride is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. Here we have from the very beginning this idea that sin is trying to take us over, but we can win. And how do we win? It's simply, if God is our master, then sin is not, right? We can only have one master in our life. Is it God or is it self? Is it God? Is it pride? Is it God? Is it gluttony? Is it pride or is it greed? What's the master of your life? And so God is telling Cain, slow down, buddy. Pay attention. Listen up. Do not let sin win. But verse 8, Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and when they were in a field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. This is what we call premeditated murder. Cain had already figured out in his mind what he was going to do. So he got him walking, got him talking, got him to a place, and he killed him. And when the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel, your brother? It's almost the same question of when Adam sinned. Adam and Eve, where are you? God is giving them a chance to repent of their sin, right? So he says, Cain, where is your brother? He's giving him a chance to repent of his sin. But Cain did not. And he said, I do not know, which was a lie, another sin, a sin to cover sin. That's how it always happens. And he says, am I my brother's keeper? Well, yes, in fact, he is his brother's keeper. Cain, being the oldest, is responsible for the younger brothers and sisters, right? So, yes, he is his brother's keeper. So, once again, another sin. And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out for me from the ground. This is a line that we will see again in the book of Numbers, talking about the blood that's on the ground that is constantly crying out. And so we will come back to that in a few months as we get to the book of Numbers. And he says, and now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. Here, he has the same judgment that Adam got, but now this judgment has been multiplied. It's even worse for Cain than it was from Adam. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. Notice this. He's telling Cain, which is a farmer, that when you work the ground, you will not produce vegetables. You will not produce fruits. You will not produce crops. So how is he to live, right? So this is the judgment that he gets. He says, you will be a fugitive and a wanderer on this earth. Cain will never be at rest. He will never have a home. He will always be moving. And Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Notice this. Cain says not that he's sorry for the sin, not that the sin is too bad. He says the punishment. He doesn't care that he killed his brother. He only cares about the punishment, which really tells us about his heart. Behold, you have driven me today from the ground and from your face, and I shall be hidden, and I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. This is Cain talking to God, saying, everybody's going to hate me. Nobody's going to want me. The first person that sees me is going to kill me. And God says, no. No way. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. Right? So here, God, even though Cain messed up, remember, there's only three people on earth: Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. Abel was killed. Now there's Cain. He needed Cain to move on, to grow, to build the population. So he is judged. He is cursed. The land will not prosper, but God will not allow him to die. God needed him for population to continue to grow the earth. And he says that no one will kill you. And notice it says, and the Lord put a mark on Cain. I've read a lot of dumb books and a lot of videos about this mark was this. Here's the reality. Nobody knows. But everybody in that time would have known the mark. So it would have been visible. It would have been identifiable, probably from a very far way, that they would have known that this is Cain and that no one should kill him. And so he went and settled in the land of Nod, which was east of Eden. And we'll learn more about that country as we read. Cain knew his wife. His wife would have been his sister, okay? We find out in the next chapter, Adam and Eve have lots of kids that are not listed. But remember, there's only a few people on the earth, right? And they all come from Adam and Eve. So he takes his sister with him, and he knows her, and she conceived and bore a child named Enoch. And when he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. Notice here what's happening very quickly. They have a child, they name Enoch. During this time, Cain builds a city. So we start to see some industrialization. We start to see some urbanization. We start to see some resources coming together. He builds a city, but notice he doesn't name the city after God. He doesn't name it after something that is holy. He names it after man, his own son. So we start to see kind of this sinful city, the city that is about mankind and man's pleasures, not about God. And now we get into this kind of begat, right? They have this son, they have this son, they have this son. We're going to skip some of this, but there's a couple things I want to point out here. Verse 19, notice it says, and Lamech took 2 wives. This is the first bigamist that happens, right? We have God's example in the garden was one man and one woman should come together and be one. But now we have one man and two women, right? So now we can see in the city of Enoch, sin is growing and it's growing and it's growing. So there's that in verse 20. It says that he was the father of those who dwell in tents and have stock. So here we can see there's two types of people: those who live in tents, and those who live in homes or permanent buildings, right? So here we can start to see in the city, there's going to be homes being built. Verse 21, it says they were the father of those who play the lyre and pipe. So now in the city, not only is there homes growing and walls being built, but now we can see that there's music and arts being happen. In verse 22, we can see that they're a forager of instruments of bronze and iron. So now they're kind of building up, and now there are metalworking. So we can see this city of Enoch is growing and growing, which would have meant a lot more people, and all the while it's growing in sin. In verse 23, Lamech said to his two wives, Adah, which means beauty, and Zillah, which means shade, talking about her hair. Her hair was probably beautiful. So notice they were named after beauty. They hear their voice, the wise Lamech, and listen to him. And Lamech is boasting of murder. He said, I've killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. So here we can see in the city of Enoch how sin is growing so much that here Lamech is boasting about murder. And not only is he boasting, he's using it to say if Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold, saying that he's bigger and better, and that if you think Cain is bad, look at me, I'm the big guy, right? So we can see how much sin is causing. Verse 25, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. Now, once again, we'll see tomorrow that Adam and Eve had lots of kids, but Seth is important here because Seth is the fill-in for Abel, right? So they had Cain and Abel. Abel was killed. Cain went away to Nod, and now they have another kid, Seth. So this is the fill-on. This will be the bearer of that promise that God made to Satan, that the seed of a woman will go. So the line of the Messiah will be through Seth, and that's why he is mentioned here. God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel. So Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. And at that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. So here in chapter 4, we've seen how the world is progressing. People are growing. We already have a city being built, and it's building homes. It's coming into instruments. It's coming into metalworking. But sin is growing more and more. And at this point, the majority of the population of earth is wicked. But even in these wicked days, notice this, that people began to call upon the name of the Lord. Some people will say this is the first revival, because this is the first time it's mentioned that people are calling upon God. And so as we read this, I've been trying to tell you guys, where is Jesus in this? Jesus is in Seth. He is that line in which the Messiah will come. So Adam and Eve had Cain and Abel. Abel was killed. Cain was pushed away to Nod, to be cursed and to be judged. And so if that was left there, there would be no place for the Messiah, the seed, to come through. But yet there was another child named Seth, and through Seth will come the lineage of Jesus Christ. Hope that makes sense. We'll see you tomorrow in chapter 5. God bless.